Hello, I'm John, and this is my channel, Must Read More. This is take 2, so I got 8 minutes into my last take, and my phone said, hey, you're running out of storage, and then it turned off, so that was cool. I'm learning, it's kind of neat, because I'm learning all these new frustrations, these new technological frustrations while I'm doing this, and it's really nice, actually. It's nice because it's a learning experience, but also because I'm really learning to appreciate what my favorite booktubers and just booktubers in general and YouTubers go through trying to create their videos. Not just the nervousness or the feeling of, am I going to say the right words? Am I going to mess up? Am I going to make people angry? Am I going to say something wrong? But just the technological frustrations, and it's really an eye-opening experience, and I find that it's really valuable to me overall. I really like having experiences where I learn to appreciate the effort that people take to create. And yeah, so like I said, this is take 2, and hopefully the phone will keep going this time. I guess I'm going to have to get a micro SD card. I don't have one, but I'm learning step by step. I'm learning, and it's cool. I like to learn. I like being able to do new things, and so anyway, I just wanted to do this kind of a weekly wrap up, and maybe a few thoughts on BookTube and some of the ideas I have for the future of the channel, or ideas I have for videos and that kind of thing. But right now I want to talk about the books I read this week. I read 5 books, and I DNF'd one, and I'm going to share them. So the first one was McLuhan for Beginners by Terrence Gordon, and illustrated by Susan Wilmarth. And so I have to be honest when I say that I read this on Monday, and I don't remember any of it, which is a shame. McLuhan is kind of a difficult character because he wrote in a, I hesitate to call it postmodern style, but he was a difficult thinker to pin down. And even in his own books, he wrote books that you could read in any order. You didn't have to read the chapters in order. He wrote books where there were illustrations, the part of the, excuse me, I'm sorry. And I feel like the illustrations and the writing in this book just kind of let me down, kind of let the reader down, and I hate to say that. But maybe that's my own failing. As I've gotten older, I find that books like this, with kind of, illustrations like that, I'm not really so visual. I really go for content over that kind of thing, but I think that's really good for younger people. And it was good for me when I was younger, because I read a lot of these when I was younger, and they introduced me to subjects that I probably wouldn't have been introduced to otherwise. But as an adult, excuse me, my books are falling off here. But as an adult, as I get older, I just kind of find that kind of thing distracting, and I just wished for more content. So I don't know if I'll pick any of these up in the future. I might, if they're, $1 or $2. I do find these for $1 or $2 on clearance sometimes. But for me right now, I just need more substance, And reading about McLuhan reminded me of one of my favorite books from either the late 70s or the early 80s. I really can't remember. It was called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Dr. Neil Postman that I read when I was probably 14 years old. So it's been with me a long time. And I've read it a couple of times since then. And I've been kind of thinking that in the future going on, I might do kind of a chapter by chapter breakdown of Amusing Ourselves to Death. Even if nobody's particularly interested in that, and the fact is I'm not a, I don't have any letters next to my name. I never went to college. That's just the way it is. But I still feel like it would be valuable for me personally to go back to Amusing Ourselves to Death, and the nice thing I'm noticing about making videos is that it forces me to take what I've read and break it down into kind of an understandable, because I write about everything that I read. I write all the time. I write every day. I've been writing every day for 20 years. Excuse me, I knocked the table. And but doing it this way, it kind of forces me to clarify my thoughts for others. And I've really never had to do that before because I write entirely for my own benefit. I had a blog for a very short time about 10 years ago, but in all that time I've never tried to clarify my thoughts for others. So this is, I find that this booktube experience is really helping me with that, and I like it. I know that I probably sound pretty disjointed, but you have to understand that I really think in writing. I think while I write, and that's really my main means of communication with myself. Or that's really what I'm trying to say is that's the main way that I synthesize my thoughts is through writing. So I can communicate much clearer in writing than I can speaking, especially now, extemporaneously. Is that the right word? Extemporaneously? I think it is. But I don't want to get on my booktube channel here and just have me reading off of a script. I like videos personally that roll organically, that develop as they go along. And unfortunately, I've also noticed that I tend to leave things out sometimes that I wish I had said, but I'm getting better. I'm not as nervous as I was. But anyway, let me get back to this, my reading, my weekly reading here. So that's that. And the next one I read was Lonesome Traveler by Jack Kerouac. And I have to say, this is the first, I'm still not sure where to look exactly. This is the first Kerouac book that I've finished. And I tried to read Desolation Angels once, and I just didn't get on with it. Kerouac tried to infuse his novels with poetry, and it just doesn't work for me. And I'm not really a poetry guy. I've tried to like poetry. I've read poetry, and it just doesn't work on me. And I really felt like, as I was reading this, that his desire to make kind of a poetic novel, in the beginning, for instance, he's working on a railroad, and he writes at a very breakneck pace, and a lot of onomatopoeia and that kind of thing. And he chops words in half, like he might say amaze, where you should say amazing, and just little things like that I find kind of irritating. but it did, as it went along, I got used to it. But he also kind of slowed his pace. It started off very fast and then slowed down as it went. And I got used to it, and I was happy that I finished this. But I still think that Kerouac would be more interesting to read about than to read his work. I still have Desolation Angels, and I have On the Road, and I'm kind of in this long-term project of mine where I'm reading fiction and nonfiction from the mid-50s up until about 1980, because I'm already pretty well versed in that period of American history. It's interested me for a long time, and yeah, I guess my question is, like, do you think that if I were to force myself to read Kerouac, would I look back on it and be thankful for it? I mean, of course I would, I guess. I'd be glad to. Every time I kind of make myself read something difficult, even when I'm not enjoying it, I'm grateful to have read it, because it expands upon my knowledge base. But I just can't, as much as I hate to say it, I just can't see myself enjoying any of Kerouac's work. I don't like to admit that, but that's the truth. And it's not even that I don't like Kerouac, it's just that I find his writing to be a hassle to read. So, yeah, that's Lonesome Traveler. And there's Kerouac. I don't know if you can tell, but he looks a little bloated. I'm not sure when this was taken, but he was a really bad alcoholic, and he died young. And there's, if any of you guys know of William F. Buckley, there is, on YouTube, you can find a panel on the firing line that Kerouac did with, was his name Lewis Yablonksky. He wrote which I have right over there. He stayed with hippies basically, and he wrote about hippies. You can just imagine him in his little brown suit over there with the hippies while they're smoking their grass and saying, "Far out, man," and he's over there writing it down, real square. But Kerouac was really drunk on that, and kind of made an ass of himself, and that's really my only experience with Kerouac, and an interview he did in French. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling, so I'll move on to the next book. I'm not going to say a whole lot about this one, because I feel like it's a book that people should read and come to their own conclusions, and I can say that I'm glad that I read it. It's Black Like Me by John Howard Griffin. In the late 1959, he was a white man, and what it doesn't tell you in this book is that John Howard Griffin had spent about a decade of his life blind. He just went blind, and then one day his sight came back, I believe. I've watched a documentary about him on our local PBS, KET, because he stayed at the monastery right over here near Louisville for a while. And so in late 1959, he took some medicine that darkened his skin, and he dyed his skin black, and he went to the segregated South. And this is just his experience of that. He went into Mississippi at a time when there was a lot of violence, a lot of lynchings, and I know this book is controversial now, because how could a white guy really get a feel for what it was like to be black in that kind of awful era? But I think it's important to remember that even though it may be controversial now, it's important to remember that John Howard Griffin was trying, he meant well. He wasn't doing this for his own fame or anything like that. He really meant well, and he was trying to open people's eyes up, and I think that's important. I'm not really going to touch on the issues in this book. I think that people should read this book, but I think people should branch out and read a lot of books about civil rights, because not all that long ago there was an awful thing called segregation, and it's really important that people know about things like that. It's really important that we know the past in order to not repeat it. And that's really all I'm going to say about Black Like Me. I think people should read it, and I'm glad that I read it. So move on to the next book, which was Burton Raffels' translation of Beowulf. And I had never read Beowulf before. I tried to once, and it was a different translation. I think it was in the big onion skin Norton Anthology of English Literature, and it just didn't work for me. But I was much younger then. That was probably 15 years ago. And it's kind of interesting because the first adult book I ever read, way back, probably when I was in 3rd grade, was Grendel by John Gardner, which is a retelling of Beowulf through the eyes of Grendel the monster, who is the bad, one of the bad guys, the beast in Beowulf, who comes and attacks Hrothgar's mead hall every so often over a 12-year period. And so it was kind of hard for me to read this book and think of Grendel as the bad guy, even though, Grendel, in John Gardner, Grendel is an existential character who really is confused about why he's alive. He's confused about what the purpose of his life is. He's confused why these people can't understand him and why they try to kill him when they see him. And that's I read that book when I was way too young, and I'll be honest, it messed me up, because at a very early age it introduced me to some pretty serious concepts, because Beowulf rips his arm off. I'm not spoiling anything. This book it was written in Old English, so it's been around a long time. I'm not going to spoil anything, and the joy of reading this book is in the reading of it. You don't have to, even if you spoil a book like this, you can't really, and yeah, it's poetry, but it's, is it verse poetry or prose poetry? You'll have to forgive me. I'm really rather ignorant about poetry. It's not, I've never been able to get into it. But I can read something like this. Like recently I read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and it was kind of in a poetic fashion. Even though I really don't understand poetry that's written like this, where it has a weird rhythm to it. But I really liked Burton Raffels' translation because it felt so immediate. The characters it was like they came to life, and I think in lesser hands that might have been kind of bungled, but it really brought those characters to life, and I enjoyed it. And ever since I was reading it, I've been thinking about another Beowulf retelling that has been part of my life for as long as I can remember, which is The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas, which I think I might actually go and watch that again tonight. It's a great movie. It's based on Michael Crichton's book Eaters of the Dead, which I've read also, which itself was based on an old it was written by well, by the character that Ibn Fadlan, who I believe, who traveled through. He was a Middle Eastern writer, thinker, and he traveled through, Europe and that kind of thing. I don't remember exact specifics, but that's what Michael Crichton based the book on, and also on Beowulf. And so it's kind of interesting that after all this time, I finally got around to reading Beowulf, when really I should have read it a long time ago. But I really enjoyed it, and I was glad to read it, and it was, I won't say that it was fun, but it was interesting to see these characters through the original, to see Beowulf and to see Hrothgar and Grendel and Grendel's mother and the dragon. The dragon gives Grendel some advice in the John Gardner book, which is basically that you should amass gold and sit on it. So anyway, that was Beowulf, and it was fun, and I'm glad to have read it. And the next one is the DNF, and I'm going to read to you the line that made me DNF this book. It's Death Merchant number 54, Apocalypse USA by Joseph Rosenberger. And I was trying to read this for Garb August because I've had this book on my shelf for a little while, and the premise sounds interesting. It's about, it's 1984, and Muammar Gaddafi, who I know that he's a bad guy, and I know he was a bad guy, and that he did some really awful things, like Lockerbie, for instance, the Lockerbie bombing. But it's hard for me to take him seriously because I remember when he was overthrown, and when I was young I saw that video of his end, and all my life he's been in shows where they were kind of showing him, and he's very flashy, a very flamboyant character, and it's hard to take somebody like that who's very flashy and flamboyant seriously. But I do know he was a really bad guy. But anyway, in this book, he's trying to, apparently he's got some kind of nerve gas or something, and he's trying to use it to attack the U.S. And it's this guy's job here. This is Richard Chameleon, and his job is to go in and take care of this threat. And I thought it was a really good setup for a book, But reading it, it became really clear to me pretty fast that I didn't want to spend 180 pages with this guy. This kind of reads like a book I might have written when I was in high school, where every single gun that pops up is named, every caliber bullet, all the grains in the bullets, and Chameleon is kind of this emotionless, well, not really, he takes glee in killing, and he thinks everything is about killing, and everybody thinks that he's just this cold psycho kind of guy, which he is. And I just didn't want to spend, I like some depth to my characters. I like characters who, if I'm going to read a book about commandos, I want the commandos to be kind of realistic. I want them to have emotions and to be kind of maybe conflicted about what they're doing, and not to be kind of these blocks of wood. Not only that, it has like footnotes to kind of political things that were going on in the 80s, and it kind of, I didn't want to be lectured for 180 pages about, about politics or anything. There's nothing wrong with politics. It's just when it comes to fiction, I think that the mark of a really good fiction writer, novelist, is that they can get their point across without haranguing and lecturing the reader. And this book was just going to harangue and lecture me. William Johnstone's Bats comes to mind. It's one of those zebra books I've talked about, where one of the characters is really just harangues people in the other characters, but he's really haranguing you, the reader. But anyway, I'm going to read the line where I said, no more. Let's see. A third of his face and one eye was all the death merchant needed. In fact, the single eye of Dumuji would have been more than enough of a target for Chameleon, who could shoot the balls off a bee at 100 feet. And this was after, there's right before this, he describes he pulled a 9mm Star PD 45 pistol. So, which is it? Is it a 9mm or is it a 45? And yeah, okay, it might be a typo. It's just, it felt sloppy to me, and it kind of felt, like I said, I like some depth to my characters, and even for Garb August, I just didn't want to deal with it. So, Death Merchant, a D and F, and I don't know if I'll keep this. It's not that I don't like books about commandos, I do. It's just, like I said, I want more depth, and I want more. I don't need to know the caliber of every weapon and the name of every weapon. I once read a book by a Navy SEAL who said that he really didn't care about all that. All he needed to know was that when he pulled the trigger, the gun went bang. And yeah, so that's my Garb August DNF. And then just a few minutes ago, actually, I finished this one for Garb August. And I count it as a Garb August read because it's just junk food for the mind. It's just entertainment. It's just fun. But it's The X-Files Whirlwind by Charles Grant. And I looked, and it's by Charles L. Grant. And he's really well known to me because he's made, over the years, I'm not sure if he's still alive. I hope he is. He's done a lot of short stories and anthologies that I've read. And I'm not going to get too much into this one because I'll probably make a separate video about it. Last week I made a Garb August video about the X-Files ruins, and I'd like to make another video about this one so that I can kind of contrast the writing styles. I think this was the better book overall, which is not to say I didn't enjoy the other one, but it was fun to hang out with these characters. So, yeah, that's my the books I've been reading. So, my thoughts about, I kind of, as the new kid in town, I kind of feel a little weird. I don't really know, the etiquette of these things yet. I'm learning as I go along, and in my BookTube newbie tag, for instance, I tagged some people that I hadn't really talked to, and I felt, afterwards I kind of felt presumptuous. I don't know if that's just in my head or genuine, but anyway, something cool happened to me the other day, which is that I was sitting in a parking lot in my car, and this lady walked out of a store, and she had her camera up in the sky like this, and I looked to see, I thought maybe she was taking pictures of the storm clouds, but it was the Goodyear Blimp. It was floating by, and it was awesome. It for a minute I felt like a kid, because I've always had this thing for like airships and zeppelins and that kind of thing, and it was really awesome. And so yeah, it was like being a kid again, seeing this giant 200 some odd foot. It's the new one, so it's a lot bigger than the other one. And it was really just a cool moment to see this giant thing floating through the sky. So anyway, that's my weekly weekly wrap up, and let me know if you've read any of these or what you think about them, and I'd be glad to hear from you. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.